Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode of Reanimated. We are coming to you from, I guess, a land where Anna and the Apocalypse does not play on screens where Stuart can see them. Hi, Stuart.
Good morning. Yes, it's sadly true.
Good morning. So, while I got to see this great Christmas zombie musical, unfortunately, young Master Tiffin was unable to see it, so we will be talking about The Night Eats the World instead, and then hopefully we'll be able to review Anna and the Apocalypse next time or a couple of times from now. But ahead of that, we have a couple of news items. But how are you doing, Stuart? How are things on the West Coast?
Things are great here. Yeah.
Rain.
Well, yeah, there's lots of rain. Oh, that's awesome. I was just thinking about zombie-wise, though. I stayed up way too late watching The Night Eats the World. That was a mistake. It's not a movie that necessarily puts you in a good frame of mind. But we'll get to that, I guess.
See, we will get to it, but we'll get to it. I watched it during daylight hours, so I guess I can't, judge you on that one. But I did not find it incredibly disturbing versus other films that I've seen. But anyway, before we get to that, a couple little items. The casting for Zombieland 2 is moving along, and they've just cast Zoe Deutsch in addition to the people returning like Jesse Eisenberg, Emma Stone, so Woody Harrelson, and wait, who's the fourth person?
Bill Murray.
Bill Murray can't return in this one.
Abigail Breslin.
Definitely getting excited to see that film. And I'm curious to see who else they add to the cast. Because obviously they're going to have to move along a different storyline.
You remember when the Amazon tried to launch their pilot and everybody hated it because it was objectively pretty bad. Like the dialogue was really stilted, and they felt like cheap stand-ins for the original cast, basically, right? I mean, I feel like that was a big part of it.
It was a big part of it. I also think that, in terms of the pilots that we've seen Amazon launch, I don't think that was very well thought out, which is kind of interesting since they did have a basis for it. So, I mean, I would have liked to have seen them give it a little bit more of a chance, but I also understand why they nixed it as quickly as they did. So, hopefully with the sequel, they do a better job. And since everybody's attached to it, including Ruben Fleischer, I think there's a good chance of that.
It's interesting that this new movie is going to also pick up a decade after the original in their chronology, since it will have been about 10 years since the original film came out. So I'm kind of glad that they're doing it that way and not trying to goof around with the timeline. Either way, I'm happy to give this one a shot. I am a little bit more skeptical, I think, than I had been going into the pilot of the Zombieland TV show.
Well, the only thing I'm feeling a little bit skeptical about is that while they have sort of locked down a lot of what the film will be about, one piece that they have shared is that one of the primary storylines is that the group is going to rescue Abigail Breslin because she's run off with another character. And I'll admit that kind of premise worries me a little bit because they've kind of created this sort of drama where maybe it won't be quite as, I don't know, that kind of thing. Given what we've seen, what's happened with The Walking Dead, when we kind of go into these scenarios, I'm worried that this is going to be like a sad shade of the first one. But I'm hopeful. I mean, I'm hopeful that everybody signed up and obviously had to read some part of this script and agree that it was worth moving forward. So hopefully that will be the case. Yeah, I don't know. I think in addition to the Zoe Deutsch character, I know that there's a few other people that they are introducing. So
that's good.
Yeah, so we'll see as it unwinds. But I agree, I'm a little bit nervous about it, but I guess we'll see. And we're gonna see it anyway.
Well, that's never really up to question. It's just whether or not we're gonna regret giving that time away. But
right, but one thing that should give, I don't know, it gives me a little bit more confidence is that it's not just Ruben Fleischer returning. They also have the original. The writers who did the script, who all collaborated on the first one. So I think from a continuity point of view and a storytelling point of view, this is probably the best scenario you could get for a sequel, versus others that tend to have everybody new attached to them, and they have just a very different vision. So hopefully we'll see something good out of this.
Agreed. So yeah, the Walking Dead. We have a couple of Walking Dead pieces of news, but and I think we might have actually even talked about this before. Is that Greg Nicotero had approached Romero at the end of season 1 to come and direct an episode of the TV show, since they'd worked together, they had a relationship, and Romero rather turned it down, saying, well, I don't know if he said that he thought it was a soap opera, but that's what has been attributed to his opinion of the TV show, that it wasn't really making enough of a statement. And as we know and love Romero and his statements, I gotta say I'm kind of glad that The Walking Dead hasn't become a serialized version of one of his films with the moral being kind of hammered into you every time.
I mean, he made several comments about The Walking Dead that told you that he wasn't over the years that told you that he wasn't necessarily on board with what their vision was. So I actually respect him a lot for not deciding to jump on that bandwagon, because he easily could have. And I think he was as respectful as he could have been, and basically said you have your thing, I have my thing, and that's okay to keep them separate. And that's better than the best case scenario I guess you could ask for, rather. And I mean, I admit, I don't know how that would have worked, even if he had been attached to something there. I don't know. I don't know that would have been the best.
It's still, I mean, it might not have been the best, but it would have had a certain cachet.
True.
There would have been an appeal. And at the end of season 1 of The Walking Dead, in the Entertainment Weekly article, they're saying, or I think it might have been another one that linked to this, they were just the show didn't really have a big following. I kind of remember it being a hit from when it started, but that could just be in my mind.
No, it did.
Yeah.
So I don't think, and I mean, he made comments about the show over the years when it clearly did have a big following. So I don't, and really, let's be realistic. Had he voiced any kind of interest, I think, in jumping on board, I think they would have been overjoyed. I think they would have made that happen, even if it was just for an episode or two. So
yeah.
Anyway, but in other Walking Dead news, if you have an interest in walking around some of the sets of The Walking Dead, well, you are in luck, because they have now or are opening basically a studio tour, so that you can kind of walk through some of the well-known sets of your favorite zombie TV show.
And for a pretty reasonable price of, it's $65 a person, which you feel like it could be way more of of a tourist trap. But either way, you got to go to Atlanta or outside of Atlanta in Georgia, and I don't know how many different locations they could possibly have close by, but maybe they're just littered with them.
Yeah, and they named a few. I mean, the governor's thing, and I don't know, I think that there are specific places where they filmed a lot of different things, so they do a little bit of a greatest hits thing. I agree. I think even though 65 is a lot of money, it seems to me as if they've got a captive audience, so they probably could have gotten away with charging more. So it's nice that they're doing that. I don't know that I will be going down there anytime soon, because that would require me going down to Atlanta, but just it's a haul, so not as long of a haul as it would be for you, obviously. But
I've spent enough time in the Atlanta airport that I'm okay not going back there.
I don't know. Maybe we should go and tour it and then do a review of the tour. Maybe that should be our 2019 resolution
for our 200th episode.
Yep.
God. All right. Well, we'll consider it. Put it in the consideration bag. All right. Well, that's the news. We're done with news. There wasn't a whole lot. It's mostly Anna the Apocalypse reactions.
True. But wait, let's go back to that. Why do I suspect that the consideration bag then just gets buried in your backyard?
Yeah.
Maybe.
That's where I keep the consideration bag. It's 6 feet under.
All right. No, but yes, most of the news is obviously related to Anna and the Apocalypse, and we will talk about that at some later date, hopefully in the near future. Hopefully it gets rolled out. And I did see something, and I don't know when it would be, but I do think that is getting released on Amazon at some point, but probably they're going to wait till it's out of the theaters to do that. So let's just keep an eye on it, and hopefully it will come to a theater near you soon, Mr. Tiffin.
Yeah, for realsies. Yeah, I will jump on it if I see it in the area. But yeah, if I was going to try and see it for this week, it would have been driving 400 miles to Los Angeles, which I was not in a position to do.
I don't know. I think you're not dedicated enough to the show, man.
I could have flown to Los Angeles to watch it. It's like a hour-long flight. Again, not about to spend several $100s.
I don't think you should do that for this particular film, though.
Okay.
I appreciate even the thought.
With all the funds coming in, all this reanimated money we roll around in and cry ourselves to sleep on every night. I should have, but, you know.
Yep.
Night Eats the World, 2018. This
Yes.
was a picture.
Yeah, so a couple of things about this film. One is that they filmed this in 2 languages. So there is there's a French language version and an English language version, and not overdubbed. But they did basically 2 takes of every
2
scene.
takes. Oh, at least 2 takes, right?
Or more. I mean, a final takes, I guess I should say, because obviously it would take a lot more than that.
Of course, you know what? You say that it's going to be so difficult, but how many lines of dialogue? I mean, how long do you think the script was?
There's not that much dialogue in this, which makes it a lot easier.
No.
But I mean, and mainly it's this character the main character talking to himself. So you know,
we're talking to another actor who has no lines.
Right.
Alfred, played by Denis Lavant.
We'll get into that a little bit later, but basically, we watched obviously the English. And
although there's a little French. There's a little French in this one, just really a little.
Tiny
and
bit.
A little Norwegian too, but really,
Right.
Again, only in one scene did I feel like I could have used subtitles for the Norwegian. The rest of the time, it didn't really matter.
But this film came out in 2018, or it was released in 2018. It was directed by Dominique Rocher and written by Jeremy Guez, Guillaume Leman, and Dominique Rocher.
And adapted from a novel,
Mm-hmm.
the night. Well, I assume it was La Nuit à dévorer le monde by Pitt Agerman.
Yep. And then the main character in this film is named Sam, and he is played by Anders Danielson Lee. And there's a few other people in this, but he is the main person and also the person that you just mentioned, Denise Lavant. And
And Goldschifte for Hani.
Yep.
Also has some lines, but that's it. I mean, there's no.
Right.
There's a few other extras. There's a lot of extras, I guess, but almost none of them have any speaking lines. So.
Right. So pretty small cast. And in terms of the sort of the scenario in this film, it's mainly based in one spot, with a few outside shots, which certainly kept production costs down. But you know, if you've got one single guy running around in one single sort of like interior set, you got to kind of keep things moving, which I think they did a pretty good job in certain scenarios. But
well, they grow that set, right? I mean,
Right.
He's in an apartment building, one of these like old school European apartment buildings, kind of like in Wreck, where each floor is one big apartment. Is what it feels like, and as the film goes on, and quite quickly in the film, he manages to open up most of the building, and so he's got room to play
Right.
in.
Right, and then they also open up the roof scenario, so we've got that
Mm-hmm.
too. So, you know, I thought that they did a pretty good job with that kind of thing and making it realistic to an extent, though we will talk about a couple of my criticisms just of the plot. But overall, I think that I thought that they filmed it very well. I thought the editing was well done.
Yeah, they did some Steadicam. I mean,
Yep.
there was some Steadicam stuff when he's doing his jogging
Yep.
routine. That I'm always a sucker for a nice single
Steadicam,
take
yeah,
Steadicam
yeah.
shot. But so I enjoyed that, and you know that I'm also a sucker for a tightly written and a small cast. So
Me too.
you can guess where I fell on this one, HA. I'm probably pretty predictable.
Yeah, and you know, I did, after watching it, and we can get into this in the criticism piece of it, I did read some of the reviews afterwards, and I, you know,
Oh, man.
And
people did not enjoy this movie as much as me.
And you know what, I really enjoyed it too. And but one of the things that came up in like actually a few of these reviews, it was like people who like the genre won't like this, and I don't agree at all, because I kind of liked some of the minutia that they got into, because these are kind of all the things that people who like zombie films like to discuss ad nauseum.
Right.
So honestly, I was like, wow, this is such a great idea to do this, but maybe this wasn't for more. I kind of think more the general audience wouldn't.
Critics. Well, first of all, they're overcritical.
Agreed.
Right? I don't know if you read the New York Times or the LA Times.
I did.
Their reviews are so
they're
cutting,
nasty.
and they're just like, there's nothing original left to do in this genre. And I'm like, dude, you did not see the same movie as me, because there was a lot going on here.
Yep.
And clearly, you're not a fan of the genre. So.
Right. And honestly, I even think because the things that come to mind when you're watching this are definitely I Am Legend, and those kinds of things. But to me, this answers a lot of those questions, or examines a lot of the questions that you might have about that I don't think they successfully did in any of the versions that I have seen of I Am Legend.
And I would argue that this takes I Am Legend and boils it down even further and makes it even more hardcore. Like, Will Smith didn't have to go through anything as bad as what this guy did, if you ask me. I mean, they were both in pretty bad situations, but Will Smith had it easier for some reasons, and we can talk about that. So should we start with a little bit of a synopsis?
Yeah, let's jump in.
Sam is, and he's been described by critics as also being like nondescript, or like plain looking. And I'm just like, whatever, who cares? Do we have to? Like, yeah, sure, the guy is a normal looking guy, and I appreciate that. Like, this movie is basically made up of normal looking people. The exception is the woman who plays Sarah is like kind of breathtakingly beautiful, and she's the only woman left in the world, or maybe we'll get to that. So I thought that was pretty funny.
Yep. That
people are complaining that he's too normal looking, and he's like a normal introverted misanthrope who has to go to a party at his ex-girlfriend's apartment, or maybe her ex-girlfriend's new boyfriend's apartment, to just try and get some of his stuff. Like, that's the setup, and you feel really bad for this guy right away.
Yeah. Like, let's talk about his ex-girlfriend for a minute, Fanny. Yeah. Man, what a jerk. I mean, she knows like he's like this, so she invites him over while she's in the middle of having this like party with her boyfriend and all of their friends, and the poor guy is clearly an introvert. Clearly, this is an uncomfortable and bad breakup, and he would just like to get this task out of the way. But she thought it would be a great idea for him to come and get his like box of things while like this thing is going on. Mean. Sorry, Fanny. Like, that's just a jerk move.
She says it was an accident, but she has taken, when she moved out of his apartment, I assume, or their mutual apartment, she took some of his stuff, and now is like holding out. Not real. I mean, it's hard to tell. It does seem like she's blowing him off. She keeps saying, "Oh, I want to talk to you. Don't leave." Eventually, she finally does tell him where the stuff is, but of course, he gets clocked in the face on the way.
Right,
like,
and let's also point out that she's like making out with her new boyfriend in front of him, then goes off to like deal with other people, and you know what? Like, not a cool thing to do when somebody's like just trying to get in and out. And also, the box of stuff that she quote unquote accidentally took is some pretty important stuff to him.
Sentimentally,
It's sentimental. It's not just sort of like, I picked up your crock pot on the way out. It's like specific stuff that he uses. Like, he's a musician that, we find that out pretty early on. And these are tapes, which, apparently he uses for his work. So I have to say that I think she possibly accidentally on purpose took them. And part of why I think that is also because of this weird torturous scenario where she's
you think this is less accidental than
because it's like, I mean, just give him the tapes and let him get out, and it seems a little manipulative. So in any case, the guy sort of is he's like the guy sitting miserable at the party. It's like he just wants to get out of there. He doesn't know where they are. Finally, she gives him an idea, so he goes back to find them and take it away from here, if you will.
So I thought that they set this up really well, frankly. Like, you have these few interactions. He's the miserable person at the party. There's a couple of looks with people that we never get to meet in the party.
Right.
Somebody opens the door at some point behind him and then leaves. Like, that's just a little creepy and weird. So he locks the door, and now like that's why he survives, right?
Well, and also, I mean, we should also throw this in, and it was interesting because a couple of the reviews I think didn't pick up on this. So as he's kind of making his way to the apartment, he gets clocked in the head pretty hard, like almost headbutted by this drunk guy.
Yeah.
And I felt like they did the choreography of that pretty well to make it believable. And he ends up having kind of a nosebleed. So I think he may be possibly slightly concussed in addition to having been drinking a little bit. So I don't
Which is
think
why he passes out.
Right.
Yeah.
Like it's not a natural sleep. And I don't think it could be for him to sleep through some of what we start to hear. I do like the whole thing where it's like this weird party's raging on. The door opens a little bit and he's just sort of frustrated with all these people and just wants to find his tape. So he does lock the door. That to me was totally natural. And also his passing out.
They set it up perfectly for him to lock. Otherwise, you don't go into a room and lock a door necessarily.
Right.
But they made it work where, and in a believable and in a way that would trigger him to be like, God damn these people, I'm going to lock this door.
Right.
And then I'm going to sit down and pass out. And
I think
all those boxes were checked. And that, I think, kind of just sets up the thoughtful way that this movie progresses. They check a lot of important boxes.
I think my only, and this is not like, this is just me being a weirdo, but I would have liked to have like more of a deadbolt or something on that door, or have that door be a little bit more solid given what we see after. But
it's a solid core door, at least.
I guess
better
so.
than most, like, you know, in the U.S., maybe in New York, you guys have older construction and have better wood, but interior doors in this country are like hollow core and super weak. But I think in Paris,
not here,
which is where this is set, no, you don't have good solid core doors.
Well, we do. We don't have like kind of hollow interior bad doors, or at least.
No, yeah, we have shitty doors.
But it also depends on what time the construction was done. So
yeah.
Anyway,
this is a solid building.
Yeah.
This is one like in Rec. This is stone building. The doors are solid. It's got bars on the first floor window. There's a lot of things going for this building that help us out as the plot goes on. Right.
So our hero or anti-hero, whatever you want to call him, our survivor maybe, wakes up and I really liked how they set it up. I liked how he woke up and it's like, you know, that whole thing, time's passed, there's light on his face, like it's clear that it's morning time. And he has like the reaction that anybody would have, like, because he's still stuck here at this apartment. And he's kind of like, oh man. And you can tell he's just like dreading going out there, but for other reasons at this point. And he catches on really quickly. Like you see him walk out and
picks up an ashtray right away.
Yeah, because there's blood all over the walls and the whole place is trashed. I also really like how, you know, he's passed out and we hear some screams and things like that. So we know something, the audience knows something's happening while he is asleep. So you already know something that he does not when he wakes up. Which I thought was cool.
They don't waste time though establishing what, you know, the end of the world and the fact that he is leery to it a little bit at least.
Right.
Because he does kind of go out to the front door, looks outside, and there's Fanny on the stairs facing away. And he's like, kind of just looking morose, right? It's hard to tell. And then he's like, Fanny, and she turns around and half her face is gone and she runs at the door. And he has a good fight or flight response and slams the door in her face. And then we kind of get, this movie also does a good job with Foley stuff and like the noises of people elsewhere in the building.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other critiques I've seen in the reviews is that they overuse this thing of sound and how he reacts to sound, and they're like, it got old. And I'm like, well, I don't know, man. Like hearing all these footsteps and then he looks out the window and that's a pretty cool little scene that we get of the neighbors.
Right. And I don't think that they overused it at all, and I think part of why I disagree with that observation is because, especially as the film goes on and he is clearly losing, like his mentally is starting to like go a little bit, I feel like you're starting, like he's somebody that you're not sure if he's actually hearing these noises or not. Right. So I don't feel like they overused that piece. So I was a little bit surprised to see that. But I agree. I love how they set the table, so to speak, here with they immediately show you what happens to Fanny. You know that, and he knows that things are really like bad. And he pretty much, I mean, we don't know exactly how much time is passing here, but he pretty much goes into survival mode pretty quickly and trying to figure out stuff. And
within a few minutes in the movie, he does start his calendar, and so you get to start keeping track of time. But in the first, definitely the first part of him like realizing that it's the apocalypse and stuff, it is a little tough to tell how many days have passed.
Right.
Like when he's scrubbing the floor, is that day one?
Yeah, I don't know.
Possibly.
But we also,
he would start cleaning
I don't think he would start cleaning immediately. I mean, but I do like, you just mentioned how he sees the neighbors across the way, and he sees what happens to them when they try to escape the building. So immediately we know.
Honk the horn on the car. So dumb. But yeah.
But immediately we know, or we can see what he's like, okay, well, I guess I'm not leaving this building for a while. And so he's immediately going into this survival mode where he's gathering supplies, where he's cleaning up the apartment.
What did you think of Lee's performance when it comes to his lines? Another criticism I've seen is that he's uncomfortable speaking English, which I didn't think so at all. I thought
I didn't think so. I think he's kind of a weird guy, and I think that
it plays to that, right?
Yeah, I didn't find him wooden. I think he's a fine actor, and I also think that it certainly, to me, played into the isolation he was feeling before this all happened, and just how he's struggling with it mentally. Yeah. As the story unfolds. So I didn't find this to be an issue to me, and I've definitely seen a lot worse actors. I thought he pulled it off really well.
At this point, like, some of the lines are written by I'm sure they're all written by non-native English speakers, and they're all almost all delivered by non-native English speakers. And so to me, I was like, before I realized that they had shot this film in French and English, and that this was literally like a special version for me, essentially. I was just like, what? I mean, I didn't pick up until halfway through the movie that he's Norwegian. But once you realize that he's not French, it makes sense that he would be speaking English with Parisians, potentially, except my experience of Paris is that you speak French. You don't really get to speak English very much in France. It's mostly like, no, you're going to speak French here. Right. Whereas in other cities in Europe, it's more likely that you would have a bunch of expats all speaking English at a party.
Right.
That's just a small, real world observation.
Yeah, I did find it unlikely that they would be speaking English to each other, but I also thought that some of that explanation is because he is Norwegian, and later we hear tapes and things like that.
Yeah, quickly after the scene where he watches the neighbors get eaten after they try to escape. And this movie makes no bones about children zombies. I don't know if you picked up on that. There are children zombies kind of in several scenes. How did you cope with that? Well,
I mean, I actually thought that the way they used them was pretty natural because these are kids at home with their parents. And I felt like they did this in a good way. And I mean, that was the reality of it. I thought that the way they did it was much better than I've seen in other films, because it was just kind of like, oh, this is what happened because this family was at home, right?
Yeah.
So, and I actually, I will say I did appreciate how this main character, in terms of how he was coping with things and how he very smart, for the most part, very smartly was getting rid of things to the least amount of risk to himself, and I'm specifically thinking of the zombie family that's in the building there.
Yeah.
His initial reaction when he's kind of scouting around the building, gathering supplies, like he's basically gone down to the main, I guess it would be either the landlord or somebody that has all the keys to the building. He collects all of those. He kind of labels all of them, and he goes exploring to gather supplies. And I love how when he goes into the one apartment and it turns out that, oh no, it's a zombie family, he's terrified. He manages to get out. He doesn't, I feel like the way they portray how he doesn't immediately, he fights back enough to get away from them, but he gets out of there and closes the door. Like,
Yeah.
he's much more of a, like, okay, I'm not going to fight these guys. I'm just going to get out of here and mark the
Puts
door.
the big like FEMA X
Right.
on there.
Like, mark the door so I never have to deal with them again. And
Yeah.
then his buddy Andre, or Alfred rather, who's in the elevator, you know, he doesn't kill him. He just kind of puts a belt around the elevator so he can't get out. So
Yeah,
he's sort of
really
minimized.
he only kills 2 zombies this whole movie.
Yeah. Well, 3 eventually, right? Because there's
very
3
end.
at the very end. But, you know, I like how they played that because, you know, he's not immediately this sort of, I guess, like Tomb Raider / like, I don't know,
Yeah.
Will Smith character where he's just suddenly really able to kill all of these things immediately. He basically removes the risk and tries to preserve himself, which I thought was cool. So
Yeah. So I also enjoyed the way that he found his way into the downstairs apartment at first. Like, he doesn't go into the stairwell
no,
until
later.
much later. But so he's like scrubbing the floor for whatever reason. He's still hearing noises around and gunshots even. And one of them comes through the floor.
Yeah.
I think this movie does tend to overstate the power of a shotgun.
I was
don't
going
think it
to
would-
say, I don't think that it would blow through, because those are like hardwood floors. Those are not messing around.
and old
Like,
school, like solid hardwood floors. And and later the door that he shoots through,
Right.
again, it's already been proven to be a pretty big, solid door.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, the power of the shotgun. But, I mean, it does create to me, an interesting scenario with the downstairs piece. And I loved, you know, if we can get over the sort of shotgun shooting through the floor issue, the way that they shot this, I thought was really
So cool.
awesome.
Yeah.
So basically, like, the downstairs neighbor has offed himself, so he almost gets or Sam almost gets taken out by the shot, and it creates enough of a hole in the floor that Sam can open it up. Like, he kind of like makes a Sam-sized hole to get through the downstairs apartment, and this whole thing where there's this really great shot where he kind of tips his head, like he puts his head and shoulders down and is sort of yelling into the apartment. Because, see, he's smart, like, he's cautious
Yeah.
about it. Like, I love
Yeah.
this. And so he manages to, and the directors manage to create a whole new sort of place for him to be in this apartment. And it's just...
And this is early on, too.
Yeah.
It doesn't, it's not like this. I feel like this would be something that would happen later, usually in a zombie film, where they start going through walls and floors. And this is like pretty quickly.
Yeah.
He takes advantage of this hole in the floor to widen it. And then also downstairs you have this nice little diorama of the man who's shot his own face off with a shotgun, which is why the shot goes through the floor, which is pretty cool. And his wife is apparently turned, which is why she's like strapped into an armchair, which is, I assume, why the guy early on in this scenario has decided to take his life.
Right. And, you know, he goes through their apartment to get supplies. Like, it's just like this interesting thing to do, which I loved. And the way that the set was set up, like, they took a lot of care in the detail of setting up this home. You can see who these people are. Even though they have passed away, like, they are definitely characters in this film, and how he interacts with them and interacts with them a little bit later is interesting. So
Yeah, you're right. There's so much set dressing that even though there's not a lot of dialogue, this is what makes up for this. And I feel like these people who've been criticizing it for being too spare and moody are not paying attention.
yeah,
effectively.
agreed. I agree. So basically, they open up this whole set for him just in this building, and where Rec did this by basically having things being like really dark, the shaky cam and whatever, so that you couldn't see a lot of the detail. I think they went totally the opposite direction here. They show you everything, like how this guy is surviving. They show him scavenging a few apartments, so you kind of understand where he's coming from. He does like an inventory. Like, I love how they show how he sort of like lays everything out and is rationing things. And then he does the calendar on the wall. Like, you really get and this is why I definitely don't agree with that comment about people who are genre fans not liking this film. I think if you're a genre fan, this one's for you.
This guy's got it figured out. I mean, he's got it figured out to an extent that I don't think most even genre fans would be like able to organize this well.
Right.
But, certainly they've thought about it, and maybe this guy had too. But I feel like you do get a lot of a sense of his personality just based on how particular he is. And then when you start with the music too, you're like, yeah, I get this guy. Like he doesn't really like people, but he comes alive and he brings the whole film alive just in the scenes where he's by himself and doing stuff that he loves because he's very emotive and the music that he's making is pretty cool. And apparently Lee is actually a musician. I mean, you can tell you can't fake playing drums like that, right?
No. Yeah, and he plays them really hard and really well. So I was like, well done. Yeah, I really liked all these details that they show of him. And again, despite the fact that there really isn't a ton of dialogue in this, I feel like he builds that character, which is very difficult to do. Both he and the director and the people who made this film build this character primarily by just watching him kind of live through it. And yes, it is definitely from a pacing point of view, it is a slower film in that sense of the word. And you're not getting all of those like crazy choreographed zombie battles. So maybe in that sense, it's like a different type of film in the genre. But I feel like this is a much more thoughtful rendition of what might happen to somebody, and it's believable. So I think and they also really focus a lot about his mental health too, which you don't always appreciate or see in other. I mean, they did it a little bit in I Am Legend, but he even had a dog with him. This guy has like nothing.
That's the thing. Yeah, this guy gets nothing. He doesn't even get a cat. In fact, that's a little bit that gets dark. A little dark. But yeah, so he has power based on the calendar, I think until like day 50, like, well, no, maybe it wasn't that long, but he has power for a few days at least after the start, and he has water for months somehow in the pipes. I think he has water until, I forget what had just happened when he was in the shower. Do you remember the scene right before that when the water goes out?
So he, at one point you see him, it's more than a month in because I counted the X's, and basically he starts to smell something. It's like after he's been playing his music and realizes that the bodies in the apartment downstairs are basically decomposing. And so this is after he quote unquote buries them. He actually does, there's this really, again, this is one of those things that I thought was really thoughtful in how they portrayed this, and they show you a lot about his character. But he goes downstairs and he basically is sort of like dressed up to get rid of decomposing bodies. So he's got like these, like, I don't know, dish gloves on, and he's got like a handkerchief mask over his face, and he is basically going to toss the body of the wife out of the window, and then can't do it because he's kind of looking around at like the things in the apartment and whatever. So instead, he basically does a little bit of a mausoleum for them. So he wraps them up. He puts some of their belongings with them. He puts their photo with them, and then he tapes up the room.
Yeah, I thought that was really nice too. And you have to think, like, as he's getting ready to dump the body over the balcony, he basically has the same view, like other than the zombies wandering around outside. I love the set was consistent, and there's like a body on top of a newsstand that's there throughout the whole film apparently. Yep. And so I think he's thinking, like, if I just throw this off this balcony, I'm gonna have to look at her body still,
right,
for the foreseeable future. So I think that has something to do with why he then does the whole sleeping bag mausoleum, and I also really thought that was great.
Yep. And we don't like, and this is the thing, this kind of scene or this kind of portrayal is very unusual. Some of the reasons they're able to do this is because the pacing is so slow, and you learn a lot about the character. I don't really, I'm definitely in disagreement with what apparently the critics' consensus was on this. They describe him just as being boring and morose and whatever, and I found this to be quiet but very interesting. You see him gradually start to just break down, like so much so that he starts talking with the zombie in the elevator shaft. Like this guy actually becomes like his friend, or at least in his head it's kind of like his Wilson, similar to Castaway. Like
it's not unlike a Wilson, and honestly there's a lot of Bub that kind of happens here
yeah,
too.
yeah. And I mean, he's like, having drinks with him, or in the way that he can. He talks to him a little bit. I thought that the one thing I thought they might do a little bit more of was a little bit more of exposition on his character. And I think it was deliberate that they didn't, but I was kind of hoping to get a little bit more about him. But
About Sam?
yeah, I thought they would use it in a way. And again, I thought they would probably do that when we're introduced to Sarah. I thought that they were going to do that too. But they don't, and I'm okay with that too. I just thought that they might use that as a little bit more of an excuse to give you some kind of like knowledge about his life, which they don't. We get a little bit with the tapes he's listening to. Clearly, he's Norwegian, and we've got something traumatic that happened to him. But like, I thought we would hear a little bit more about Fanny. I thought we might hear a little bit more about why he was in Paris or something like that, but we don't.
He does talk about his mother at one point and just says she's not the kind of person who would walk over everybody else to survive, so she probably didn't make it. And then he says something that I actually disagreed with while he was saying it, but whatever. He's like, at least it wasn't something unfair like cancer or a car accident. I'm like,
right.
No, this is way more unfair than any of those things. Getting eaten. I'm sorry. But yeah, so we do get a little bit, maybe not as much as we could have in those sorts of monologue scenes with Alfred. And we should also talk about these zombies, HA, because one of the creepiest things about these zombies is how they don't vocalize at all.
Yeah.
They are silent from their mouths, at least. They do make weird, like, cracking noises.
Yep.
And they scrabble with their hands a lot.
Yep.
But terrifying. I thought this was really scary.
It's really, like, I kind of thought the way that they did this was a very, I mean, it was a terrifying way. I mean, it basically looks like their whole bodies are overcome and kind of possessed a little bit. It's just very disjointed walking. And the silence means that you just hear this kind of running when they hear you, and they have very, very excellent sense of hearing. And so we see this a few times, and the way, I have to say, the actors who were portraying the zombies and portraying this kind of sensory, they're like how they react to noise and things like that, I thought it was excellent. Like,
yeah,
if they can't see, they kind of train upon you. It makes them almost more dangerous because you can't hear them yelling.
Right.
So I'm very much attracted to sound, which they use, and they use it very smartly. And it's kind of an interesting thing to think about, because so far we have seen no other survivors other than him. And any noise he makes attracts them. And this is Paris. It's a pretty densely populated city. So it's sort of like when he realizes that he's playing the drums and attracting them, he immediately stops the first time. And you can see the realization, like how terrified he is when he realizes that they're all kind of running because they just heard that noise. Mm-hmm. But it also tells you a little bit about them and about what their sort of special super zombie powers are. And so that's kind of like a cool thing.
Yeah. What's not one of their super zombie powers is grip strength.
Nope.
They that really comes into play in one of the final scenes of the movie when he's crawling up the elevator.
Yep.
And up the elevator shaft, and there are dozens of zombies trying to like grab onto him, and he's 2 inches away from them, and none of them can hold onto him.
Well, it's almost like they play it so that and with the cracking and the whatever noise, it's like their tendons are so tight they can't actually control them. Like, it's a very static kind of portrayal. So they really are almost like a rigor mortis kind of thing that they're doing with them.
Yeah.
So
we also have this cat scene that we've already alluded to. Maybe we don't need to go into more detail, but he sees this cat on the street one day. He's like using this little scope for a paintball gun to kind of look around and occasionally shoot zombies with paint. He sees a cat, and he's like, I'm going to make you my friend. I'm going to lure you inside. And goes to extreme risk and lengths, and even gets caught outside the building,
Yeah.
only to have the cat just like hang out next to a zombie.
And he kills the
meow.
cat.
At least they don't show him actually,
Yeah.
but they show him shooting at it. But yeah, that's pretty dark.
Yeah, pretty
Why?
dark. Oh, and also we should mention in this scenario, he manages to get like his shins are all cut up, and he's not sure whether he's contracted the zombie virus, so he actually tries to kill himself.
Well, no, he gets ready to kill himself
Yeah.
if he sees himself turning, and almost does when he falls asleep with a shotgun
Right.
wedged under his chin. That was nuts.
Yeah, that was crazy. And then I mean, he's really, I mean, look, the whole cat thing, that just, I thought that was a great, not great, it's dark, definitely, but it just shows you where his mental state is, that he would take such risk because he saw this one alive thing that's not, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's
He's
not
pretty
part
desperate.
yeah. And then, you know,
And that's months in. Like he doesn't see the cat until I think it's already getting colder.
yeah,
And this another cool thing about this movie is they track the passage of time with his calendar. At least it's kind of peripherally shown in some scenes.
mhm.
And the weather changes, and it never really gets super wintry. And I feel like by the end, he's kind of not dressed for super winter anymore.
Yeah.
He's still wearing a sweater.
But we still see the passage of time. We still see how
Yeah.
he's collecting water. We see
Which,
how
the first time you saw the way he collected water in the trailer, you were like, "Oh, that's been done. It was in 28 Days Later." But do you still feel like that was trite for him to do it that way?
well, I think it was a reference, obviously, to 28 Days Later.
I just think it's the only way you can collect water.
Right,
At least it's Northern Europe where it
I
rains
guess
all
my
the time.
only thing about that thing is that I probably, given that water was coming down, him showering on the roof with the available water probably would have made more sense. But okay, you know, but I thought that was a smart thing to show. And you know, and again, this sort of where he is at the point when we meet Sarah is in a pretty dark place. Like he's having kind of crazy nightmares. He's just really deteriorating just from loneliness.
Yeah, by the time she shows up, he is already hallucinating.
Right.
And they do that in a nice way too. He's looking to his scope. You see maybe a hand at a curtain across the street, and then he looks again. There's nothing there, and you're like, "Did I see that?" There's
Yeah.
a shadow. He gets in the bathtub, and he hears a footstep, and a shadow moves across the doorway
Yep.
in the apartment, and he's like, "No, there's no way." So what it does is it sets up that he is aware that he's hallucinating
Right.
to me, and that he's discounting the hallucinations he's seeing. Because when he's in the bathtub, he doesn't even get out of the bath. He's like,
Nope.
"No, there's nothing there," right? But he also is having these terrible nightmares.
Right.
Yeah.
And then Sarah shows up, and this is the second point where a shotgun has a lot more power than it really should.
Yeah.
And she's very badly injured, and he takes care of her. I will say, and again, I would say for folks who haven't seen this yet, watch this. Don't let us spoil it for you, but we're gonna come up with some spoilers right now. I know.
Unlike the rest of this, yeah.
Well, we are, but I mean, this is the biggest one, I think, in the
Yeah.
film. But basically, he shoots through, and it's actually a woman named Sarah, and he has injured her gravely with the shotgun. I just don't believe that a shotgun would have been able to shoot through this to cause the injuries that it did here, but she's pretty gravely injured, and he has some massive first aid skills and helps her. And the next few scenes are her kind of wandering through his apartment, talking to him about what's next.
Making music with him,
Right.
telling him that he needs to leave because he'd been playing the drums with the windows open. Like this, what's also set this up was all the zombies left his neighborhood.
Right.
Like he even goes outside and wanders around, and
Yep.
there's nothing there. But then he starts to play the drums out of rage, and all the zombies show up, and now
Yep.
he's like kind of got himself again into a pickle.
Right,
And so
because
one of the
they're
things-
like piling up outside. Like
Yeah.
they will eventually overwhelm him. And I mean, basically, it seems like the only thing that will call them away is another noise. Well, who's going to make another noise, or what's going to make another noise? There's nobody really but him around. And also, we should say that the way Sarah got there, she's got like a grappling hook and stuff.
Yeah, so she must have come from above somehow.
Yeah,
But it's not ever really
clear.
that explained, because Also, it's not explained why she wasn't saying something when she was in the apartment. Like,
Right. And also,
unless
if
she-
you're, I mean, let's, this is one of my criticisms of this film. Why would you be doing this at night?
Yeah.
Right? Like just from a safety point of view, if you're trying to like throw a grappling thing to know that you're solid in terms of like how you have hooked it to the building or whatever, and like I know why she's doing it from roof to roof at this point because he's called all the zombies back, so that makes sense to me. Probably she was cooped up somewhere else. But
Well, and there's a photo. When eventually he finds her camera.
yeah, she had
has
taken a photo of him.
of him. So
So
she knew that he was there,
So she knew he was there and she was coming to find him. I mean, you know, people
but
are going to
wasn't
be
calling out. Yeah.
right. You know that people
just-
are. You know that people are going to be clearly if he's been surviving this long, he's going to be on guard. Like, how about calling out to somebody? Like, that's kind of that whole thing. And you know, I think he almost thought he was hallucinating because we've seen it before. So they kind of set
Yeah.
up that scenario. So this was the only piece that really kind of bothered me because I just don't believe that she would have been so stupid. But
And she comes, yeah, like she runs it. She's running in the apartment. There's a lot of things that don't go right here. But then they have these few scenes together. She keeps kind of disappearing, and he has to go look for her. Another thing that ends up happening as a result of her visit is that he breaks into the family apartment and finally kills them to get all their food. Because he's like, I'm going to need more food. Now there's 2 people.
right.
He seems to get like 2 shopping bags full of stuff.
Right,
then
but what I will say, and this is the part where he takes out that family, I know that this is like sounds a little nuts, but I loved how he was like, I'm not going to risk myself, so I'm going to do it this way. So he basically creates a hole in the door and takes them out with no risk to himself, basically. And it is dark.
Yeah.
It is dark because, I mean, like, look, he takes out a little zombie kid, and that's totally horrible.
He
But
doesn't even hesitate. I don't even feel like it's dark at that point. He's
Yeah.
just like matter of fact about it.
Yeah.
But I do think he should have just drilled them instead of using the shotgun.
yep.
He doesn't ever seem to run out of ammunition for that
Oh
thing.
yeah,
It's only-
no.
it's-
I definitely think he should have like knocked that whole. He didn't need to use the shotgun for that. And again, I don't think the shotgun would be that effective.
I think it was nice, and it was just so matter of fact and very efficient. And efficiency is kind of like this is Sam's MO, right? Like he is an efficient, organized, going crazy dude. And
Right.
then he has this realization, which, yeah, I had a suspicion that this was the case too,
Me too.
because it didn't look good when he was doing CPR, and when he walked out of the bedroom after doing CPR, he looked really depressed.
Yep.
And he's like commiserating with himself, and then the next morning she's just there eating soup, and he's like kind of not surprised to see her. And I'm like,
Yep.
oh, okay, that's how this is going.
Yep.
So she gives him some really good advice about like not waiting to die or go insane, and then he disappears, and he's like, oh wait, Sarah. Oh yeah, she's just been dead the whole time.
Yeah, and so he's basically telling himself he needs to get out, and that's fine. This
But
is
again, just one blow after the other for this guy, and again with the I Am Legend thing, he doesn't even get another person. Like right, Will Smith gets another woman and child
Yep.
in the third act of that movie. Sam gets nothing.
Yeah, and again, it just seems kind of lame the way they played it. I think they could have played it without him taking her out, but okay.
Could have,
That's-
but then this is to me this is the message. It's just like you are gonna be on your own.
Yeah, but there is a hopeful message. I mean, or at least you could read into a little bit of it. But he basically uses all of this in this interaction as a way to psych himself up for getting out.
He makes a huge mistake.
He does make a huge mistake, but I don't. Maybe he's just going crazy, but he decides to burn all of his tapes for some reason. That's kind of. I think that's him saying goodbye to maybe some of the things that would keep him isolated before. I don't know, but he does that, and it sets off the fire alarms. I'm just kind of like, why did you need to do that, dude?
Why does the fire alarm still work?
Right, but I also like that it works, so that was kind of cool. The thing that I thought was really just stupid, and I didn't. This is one of my criticisms, is that he sees once that the zombies break in, he has time to run up those stairs. He takes his sweet time.
Yeah.
Like, that was weird.
He even goes down a few
Yeah, like, why
flights
would
of
you
stairs.
do that? You know,
Like,
your only way out is up. And
Yeah.
so
and
I thought that was dumb.
He was so prepared. Like, he had his backpack, he had his shotgun, he
Yeah.
had the grappling hook. He, like, loses all of that. I assume all of his food,
Yep.
too, because of his decision to go down and release Alfred. But that is one of the cool things about this, is that he releases Alfred. I don't know if it's cool or not. You might think that this was lame, but Alfred then follows him up the stairs. But then he just kind of like opens Alfred's apartment. I assume it was Alfred's apartment.
Yeah, and I just
door.
I thought that
and
was
he just kind of wanders in there, and I thought that was actually kind of I don't know, sweet.
I thought
That's
it was
the bub
sweet.
moment. Yeah.
I thought it was sweet. I didn't believe that Alfred wouldn't try to kill him, but okay. That was the bub moment where he doesn't. But I just don't buy that he would have done some of these things, and I can see him panicking, and it did lead to a pretty cool scene with him getting stuck in Alfred's elevator, which was like, full circle.
Oh, the tables have turned.
And then I did like how they shot, like, okay, when we see the non-grip strength of the zombies here, but I did like how this scene was shot where he's like climbing up through the elevator shaft. I thought that was very cool.
The effects of him shooting the head off of that female zombie were A-okay.
Yep,
also.
they
Holy
were
crap!
awesome.
Like, they did some really amazing effects that I couldn't see the wires.
Nope.
Like, it was her head
Nope,
just
they did a good
exploded.
job. But then there was and then they did this great scene with this sort of one-armed zombie in the old people's apartment, and that hole comes in handy. But there's this whole like crazy thing where he like wraps the zombie's head, and there's this great thing where the zombie's like kind of tracking him by movement, by the sound, and that was, I thought, cool. And then he gets back into the apartment. This I wasn't sure as much, like maybe the smoke confused him or something, but I just don't think he would have made it up to the roof.
Without coughing?
Yeah.
Yeah. But he, so long story short, he does manage to get off the roof, grappling hooks the building, and jumps.
Oh, God,
with no
this was
supplies.
But
it was kind of funny.
It was funny, and I love that I love that they did this, but this was such a realistic thing. Like, you think he's going to be, like, triumphant and just, somehow swing across and be okay. Well, he knocks himself out on the other building because he's never done this before. So I kind of loved that they pulled that. I thought this was such a great way to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I maybe it's wrong of me to love that, but I did.
Yeah, it was pretty hilarious. And then, like, the final note of optimism that you get is that there are church bells chiming. Right. And you kind of look out and pan across the rooftops of Paris, just going on and on and on forever, and lots of churches.
Right.
It's not clear if it's the church that's like a block away that's chiming, or one that's way on the horizon. But that seems to catch his interest.
But he can walk probably from rooftop to, like, all what he's looking at now are pretty close together compared to his building,
which was sort of set apart. Yeah. I mean, I would watch a sequel to this.
Me too.
I don't think that you could have him be by himself for the entire sequel.
Right. But you could see a little bit more of, like, getting out of Paris. There's a lot you could do with that. I actually really enjoyed this a lot. And which is also why I don't read reviews for films until after I've watched them, for the most part, because I don't really want to be I just don't want to be biased going into a film.
I think we had the opposite effect this time. I usually don't read the reviews also, but when I did, I was like, oh, I just disagree with you, reviewer.
No, I mean, I read them after because I kind of want to see how it was received from other people. And it's interesting to see if my opinions match up. Mine definitely didn't. Although I did see a couple of good reviews. Like, I think AV Club gave it somewhat of a good review.
Okay. Yeah, it wasn't great.
Off the charts, but the biggest complaints I saw about this was the pacing, the fact that it wasn't like a true zombie film, and all of this stuff. But I would say that if you're interested in these kinds of stories, and you're more interested in, say, how somebody is surviving and the logistics of surviving and what that means just in terms of like a mental state, I really thought that this was well done. I thought it was very thoughtful in how they set up the sets. I thought it was thoughtful in how they showed you a lot about this character without dialogue. In fact, I would even say it was artful. So I disagree with a lot of those reviews. And I do think that if you're into the more sort of I don't want to say philosophical impact of or mental health aspect, I guess, of something like this happening, like the isolation, what would happen to a person, then you would really enjoy this film. So I definitely recommend it. I give it definitely high marks.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It does have 79% on Rotten Tomatoes, which means that, actually most critics are enjoying it. It's just the big ones, the LA Times, New York Times, Village Voice, are all kind of... Actually, Village Voice does like it. The quote from Village Voice is, "If you don't get too hung up on the film's many contrivances, particularly its uninspired finale and any scene where Lee speaks, you might find The Night It Eats the World to be sufficiently moody." That's sufficiently moody.
Wow.
Being the best thing that he could come up with, Simon Abrams at the Village Voice. Whatever. HA and I totally got on board with the details, I think, of this film. And I enjoyed watching it as I did in the middle of the night, which is always a bad idea. I was on the edge of my seat most of the time, so totally dug it. I guess, is that everything we have to say about it?
Yeah, I think that about sums it up. What would you like to talk about next week?
Well, we can try again for Anna and the Apocalypse.
Okay.
However, I'm not going to be super optimistic because I did read that it's just going to be on 30 screens. Maybe one of those will be near me.
Okay.
I don't know. In lieu of that, are you prepared to do season 8 of The Walking Dead?
Sure. You want to do the first couple episodes?
Yeah.
Because it's usually a double episode anyway in the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
Okay. So thank you for listening to this episode of Reanimated 189. And please let us know what your thoughts on Night Eats the World. You can do that on our show notes at reanimatedpodcast.com. Email us at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. We're on Twitter at reanimatedpcast. Oh, and HA, thing that happened this week that we kind of talked about last week or 2 weeks ago. Freaking Daredevil got canceled.
Yeah, it happened this week. Yeah, I know. I was really bummed out about it.
I'm starting to think that this is not what it usually means when people start just canceling. I mean, this has never happened before because three related shows on one network are also just kind of like unheard of. But I honestly think this is just part of their deal with Disney to let Disney start picking up all of these shows. It's just that those announcements aren't really coming out.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know, but I have to tell you, I truly enjoyed that season, the last season of Daredevil, and I thought it was so well done. So hopefully we'll get to see them back in some other iteration. My other thought is that maybe they're doing an ensemble show or Disney is doing something else like that. So hopefully they'll do something, but I'm really bummed out. Maybe it'll bring it back. I did see that the reaction to this was not a positive one. People were very unhappy that they did this, probably feeling like we did. So maybe there's still hope.
Yeah, well, indeed. Let's hold out hope for that, among other things. HA, any parting words?
Nope. I will say, like with Night Eats the World, I enjoyed that much more than I thought I would, and I definitely think that there's a spot for that in this the zombie genre continuum. So I think I would like to hear what people think about it. And hopefully next week we can talk about Anna in the Apocalypse. But, if not, we're going to leap into season 8 of The Walking Dead, and we will eventually review Anna. But we'll have to make it so that Mr. Tiffin can actually see it. So.
Yeah, that's right. Okay, cool. Well, thanks for listening.
And until next time, ciao.
Bye.